All right, so my topic is sex trafficking, rape, and the objectification of women. So I'm gonna start by an anecdote. So you guys probably heard like recently there was like the shooting at Trafficking. You probably saw that like on the news. So obviously we weren't like involved in obviously that, but me and my mom like had arrived like seconds after it happened. And even though in that situation it wasn't like a mass shooting, it like made me think about how like things like that. It's like you go out, you think you're okay and you're safe, and then you could like be involved in mass shooting and then like not go home. It can kind of be, although it's not as often now that it's like out like it's like that because most of the time it's actually on technology. But like it could be things like that where you think you're going out and you're safe, but then all of a sudden like things like this can happen. You know, I mean, it happens more often every day than you think, or you could be abducted and then not make it home from that. But so first of all, I just want to start by defining what sex trafficking is. It's like the official government definition, and it's defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age. So there are about 14,500 to 17,500 people in the United States who are trafficked a year, and then 46% of those is for the purpose of prostitution. And then human trafficking is like the largest growing crime industry, and it has the largest income revenue, or the third largest income revenue, and they make $32 billion a year. So I'm just gonna briefly address this because it does affect this topic. So with like the rise of the use of technology, it like makes pornography more common, and boys are starting to get like involved in this at like a younger age, and that can really affect their psychology and how they like view women if they're exposed to it at such an early age. So like usually, which is more commonly, they're exposed to it at as early as 13 years of age, but the earliest that some are exposed to it is at 5 years of age. And so in a study done on male consumers of pornography, they found individuals with sexual addiction may develop an intensified response to sexual stimuli due to their brain's heightened sensitivity. And even if they're like trying to stop, it's like any drug where it's like they have withdrawals and they have these cravings, which eventually, because of our simple nature, they can lead to them having to satisfy these cravings in physical ways. Um, and so uh, this kind of bridges into my first biblical integration. So 1 Thessalonians 4:1-8 talks about how one should act in a way that's pleasing God. This specific passage focuses on how Christians should obtain or abstain from sexual immorality. So 1 Thessalonians 4:4-6 says that each one of you know how to control his own body in holiness and honor, not in the passion of lust like the Gentiles who do not know God, that no one transgress and wrong his brother in this matter, because the Lord is an avenger in all things, as we told you beforehand and solemnly. So not only does the act of rape or sex trafficking have effect on the woman like in the moment, but also has a prolonging effect like on the rest for the rest of her life. She has to live with that, and so a lot of them they cope with it through drugs. It says there's a statistic that says that women who go through this are 3.5 times more likely to use marijuana, 6 times more likely to use cocaine, and 10 times more likely to use other major drugs. And then if those don't work, there's usually leads them wanting to commit suicide. So there's 33% of them who think about committing suicide, and then 13% of them actually attempt to commit suicide. So a lot of this is because we live in a sinful world where a lot of people they don't know Christ, and so if they have gone through these things, they don't have the hope and the love of Christ to avenge them, like it says. Then they will rely on these worldly things like drugs, and eventually they just can't live with it anymore, and it leads them to want to end their life. So this bridges on to rape, since like I said, and all that it was related to rape and how men act towards women. So as of 1998, an estimate of 17.7 million American women have been victims of attempted or complete rape. And so there's 1 of every 6 American women has been a victim of at least completed or attempted rape. And the most common age like range that are commonly victims of this is 16 to 19-year-old girls are 4 times more likely to be victims of rape or sexual assault. Um, Although despite the common misconception of it being like by strangers where you're just like walking down the street and all of a sudden like someone attacks you, it's actually only 14% were victimized by strangers, and the rest is someone who's connected to the victim in some way, whether it be a coworker, an acquaintance, or a lot of times it's like a member of their family. Although a example of it being a stranger is on May 24th, 2020, a 25-year-old girl named Ashlyn Black was raped, strangled, and stabbed to death during her first date with 25-year-old Ethan Hunsaker after the two connected on Tinder. So technology has actually played a huge part in the increase of rape and sex trafficking happening, with things like dating apps where it happens, and social media where people meet online and they are not who they said that they were whenever you met them. So that brings me to sex trafficking. Only 45% of victims meet their trafficker in person, and now 55% encounter the person via technology. So that can be big. Um, Social media platforms like Facebook has recently had a 125% increase in trafficking recruitment, and then Instagram 95%. Although it used to be more common for it to happen in these places, it doesn't happen as much like out in the open in places like strip clubs and mental health facilities and private foster homes like it used to. Um, and the lady that is in that picture right there, her name is Rachel Fisher, and she can attest to this because she is a sex trafficking survivor, and since then has made herself become an expert as she researches more about this. And so they had her on CBS News in 2023, and she discussed what she knows about this. She said that these kids start sharing all of this info. They start building this relationship. They think that they have a boyfriend. They run off. They hang with the boyfriend, and they get addicted to drugs, and then it goes from there. So a lot of times, since children or young girls are given social media and phones and stuff at like a young age, or just like a lot of teenage girls are rebellious, they like will meet someone online, they think that he is like their new boyfriend. They agree to meet up, and then usually they have like this deceptive tactic where they like give you everything you want. They put you on this pedestal, make you think that you're amazing. They buy you all these things to where a lot of times, even if the authorities or their parents find them, they'll end up running back to the person who is trafficking them because they think that their life with him was better. Until usually when that happens, he turns it around, and like that's when all the violence begins, and she realizes that she's made a mistake. Um, and so, although you may think, like, oh, what can I do about this? Like, that's up to the police or government. Um, well, actually, officers are problem solvers, and in the case of human trafficking investigations, a lack of knowledge on what to do to solve the problem prevents them from being able to address it, even if they can recognize that it's happening. And there's the information that's just out in the public about what it is and like what the public knows about it is very scarce. So a lot of people just don't know what to do even if they're encountered with it. And then even the government, they have passed laws and things like the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was passed nationally in 2000, which authorized the expenditure of federal resources to combat slavery, involuntary servitude, and sex trade. And then there was another bill passed in 2018 that prosecuted the online marketplace for knowingly facilitating sex trafficking. So those laws are in place, but people don't all follow laws. Like they're in place, but they can only do so much. People can still break them, and so the public really is relied on to recognize these things and like let people know or do something about it if they can recognize that someone may be a victim of this. Although that is not always the case, and that's because of something called the bystander effect. And the bystander effect can be defined as the inhibiting influence of the presence of others on a person's willingness to help someone in need. So a lot of times, even if people are witness to these things happening, they won't do anything. And an example of this happened years ago to this woman. She was walking home, and all of a sudden she got raped and stabbed to death. And there was 38 witnesses, like respectable, law-abiding citizens around. They heard it, they saw it happen. None of them did anything. They didn't even contact authorities because they just like didn't know what to do, or they didn't think that they could do anything. And there have been social experiments done. There's this one done where this guy hired an actor and actress and had the actor like pretend that he was abducting the girl, and they just did it out in public. A bunch of people were walking by, and one of the ladies who walked by and didn't do anything, she said that it was because she didn't feel like she needed to be the hero, like it wasn't her job to do anything about it like someone else would. And there's another group of men who walked by, and at first they didn't do anything about it, but then eventually they went back and they saved her. But whenever one of the guys from that group was interviewed about like why he originally wasn't doing anything, he said, "Oh, like none of my friends or like no one else was doing anything about it, so like I thought that like I should not do anything about it." So that is kind of like the reasoning that a lot of people have in their heads whenever they don't do anything about things like this. Um, and then in another decision models, bystanders are presumed to weigh the costs and rewards of helping, and bystanders rationalize their decision on the basis of which choice, helping or not helping, will deliver a positive outcome for themselves. So a lot of times people will literally consider like, oh, how's this going to be beneficial to me? Like if this isn't going to benefit me, then I'm not going to do anything. And that's just like a very selfish way to approach it, which brings me to my second biblical integration, which is Philippians 2:1-4, which talks about how as Christians we are to be imitators of Christ, and part of that is being selfless and being willing to put others' needs before ours, as Christ says. And then Philippians 2:3-4 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." So as Christians, we are called to be selfless. I mean, Jesus portrayed that when he died on the cross for us. We should be willing to be selfless, and even if it means like putting our life on the line for someone else, that's what Jesus did for us. That's how we can reflect his character. And then Ephesians 5:11 says, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." So we're also called to literally expose the darkness that's in the world and shed some light on it, and like make sure that people are aware of this issue, so that we can do something about it. So here are just like some solutions I came with. Obviously, it's like too big of an issue. Like it can never fully be stopped, but we can do things that will significantly decrease the amount of times that happens. So first, parents need to start putting more restrictions on what social media platforms their children have and what they're doing on it. And so kids these days have Instagram and all this stuff like at such a young age, and they're so naive. They have no idea like what's actually out in the world. Like if some random guy, or like even if a guy who like says that they're like this younger girl, she thinks that she like made a friend, like they have no idea. And even like teenage girls can be naive sometimes too, but it shouldn't be all up to the parents, because social media industry should try to do things like putting restrictions on like things like Meta, Snapchat, and TikTok, so that way to make sure that the traffickers who are lurking on the internet cannot do these things and use these tactics on these girls. And then lastly, even like any of us in this room, usually how like rape, specifically rape plays out, or like sometimes sex trafficking, they're not just gonna go up and just like all of a sudden attack a girl. Usually they'll walk up to her, they'll ask weird questions like, "Oh, are you with anyone? Like, do you live near here?" And you can usually tell if a girl is feeling very uncomfortable around a man who's asking her all these questions and like harassing her. So usually you can go up, if you like start making a scene, act like you know the girl. Like if this is a girl who like sees another girl, and you can say things like, "Oh, my brother," or like "my husband," or something is over there. Like it will immediately, they'll feel like there's too many people involved or it's too much of a scene. It'll immediately scare them off, and then they will be gone. So just like things like that, and then you could just save like one person who could have possibly been raped or trafficked. So even any of us in this room can do something, but even if it is a circumstance where like the girl's literally being attacked in that moment, just like reach the nearby person, get like a whole crowd together, and make sure that everyone who does it, if it's in a public area, does something about it, and you call the authorities and stuff. So that's it.
I got some questions. I wrote down 46%, but I don't
Okay.
remember.
Oh, that was the wait. Oh, I remember it was.
46% with a question mark.
No, I like have it in the back of my head. But I can't. Oh yeah, it was for the purpose of prostitution.
Okay, yeah. So
So that can include like boys too, because it does happen to males. It's just like a large, like way larger percentages.
right.
Most of the time, women.
So I'm just like I think my question would have been like 4% of trafficking that happens. Like what's going on
So a lot of times it's pretty split. Like I said, males can be subject to prostitution, but it's more likely women. The large majority of males who are trafficked, it's for forced labor, which also women can be trafficked for this reason too. But again, more likely it's for the prostitution, or it's like forced crime, where like essentially like they traffic these boys to like force them to commit a crime for them, so that way like they're not the ones if they get caught to be put in jail for
there?
it.
Yeah, that was more curiosity. Also, there's some every time we have a project like this, it always is crazy to me. 14% you were specifically talking about rape. It's
Yeah.
such a low percentage of stranger, which I think is kind of a probably a project in and of itself. Um, just in terms of like family members, how often that happens, trusted folks, even within a school situation, right? So I gotta think there's something about this that I don't know. In my mind, there's the larger issue of sex trafficking, and under this big umbrella of on one hand, there's the big issue of sex trafficking. On the other hand, there's this just that this is not really a question there. It's just it seems like okay, maybe here's the question, and this might be a little unfair. Like this is one of those. How much of this is a problem that is this organized crime type sex trafficking thing versus cultural problem of just sexual abuse? The high percentages come from people that you know, people that are related, or dare I say, even friends and people trusted and so on. How much of the concern for sexual abuse is a trafficking concern versus hey, these are people that I know?
Um, I feel like the thing about it being like people that are connected to the victims, that's more specific for rape. It's not like for sex trafficking, it's usually like a stranger, but it's like a stranger that you like would meet online and they like pretend it's like one you've gotten to know online, and so it may be someone that you did think that you trusted, but it wasn't like a friend that you've like known for like multiple years. Um, rape, it's actually like a way larger percentage that it's a family member, which is like messed up. That was like the largest percentage of people who were like victimizing the person.
Yeah, like a smaller percentage as seems like when the abuser is a stranger, it's fair to say like it's probably more intense. That's a terrible way to ask it because all of it is intense, but for lack of a better term, extreme. Does the question make sense?
Like, are you talking about like maybe it's like more abusive to them, like a more like physical effect?
So like the 14% that we're talking about, what portion of those is involved directly with human trafficking, like the actual sex trafficking?
I don't know, like
And yeah, like don't feel like you gotta like pull these stats off the top of your head. But my curiosity is, okay, if all this is the stranger, if 14% are strangers, how many of those strangers are pushing trafficking and prostitution versus the other percentage of folks that you know, family members, whatever, acquaintances with sexual abuse or rape. There's not forced prostitution. There's not. trafficking that happens, but it's still a sexual abuse
Like, how much of it, like, for, like, sorry, I can't,
case. I
you're
know.
like, it's like, I don't really know exactly what you're asking.
Right.
Like,
I'm not sure. It's just those numbers just always bother me. How high the percentage. I mean, you gave us a low percentage. That means the high percentage for all people you know.
mm-hmm.
And trafficking is one of those things where it's like I'm concerned about it. It seems like what's underlying it is a bigger issue of, yeah, you should be worried about strangers. Would it be, now this is a question that I think is asked, but it's a question. Would it be fair to say that the other ladies in the room, be more concerned about strangers or the folks in your life that again, unfair question, but it's like the numbers don't lie.
I mean, like, I'm not saying, like, obviously, like, because, like, for me, it's like, I think of, like, people in my family, and I know that, like, they would never do anything like that. I don't know, I feel like I can't just, like, go around and say, like, oh, everyone that you think that you trust, like, they can't, like, they could actually betray you, because, I don't know, it just depends on, like, that person. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like you don't know what that person is struggling with. So if you have like a significant other that like you don't know has been struggling with like addiction to porn and stuff, it that could affect them, and then that could make things like this happen to where they like force on you. I mean, it makes me think of like I don't know if anyone here. I mean, this could just be because I'm from Arkansas, but knows who the Duggars are, and like the oldest one, I can't remember who, but he like went to jail for all that because um and like no one knew that he was like getting into all that, and all of a sudden it was just like revealed that he was doing all that. So I mean, anyone I feel like can have like struggles or have kind of like something that they are hiding from people, and I guess maybe just like know the person that you're
Yeah.
with.
So all the questions like I just asked, tricky because there seems to be connection. And what I really liked about what you did was like you were just brought up all the connections. Like I'm glad that you brought pornography into the conversation. Really close connection. I'm glad that you brought in like all these percentages. It's such a tricky thing to figure out how they're interrelated. I really like that. I'm really glad that you were saying like, very multi-dimensional thing. Reason because in my mind, whenever there was a couple years ago, where I had like 7 or 8 people doing sex trafficking projects, and many of them were worried. It was like, well, so and so is also doing this project. Should I also? I'm like, look, I bet you anything, y'all will go about doing the research and find that there's enough to talk about for multiple projects. So it doesn't surprise me. Like honestly, like you could probably look and see if you wanted to focus on any one of these issues, you probably could have taken it and ran with it. So here's the last question, and then I'll leave you alone. Of these issues, like if you're really thinking, I'm going to be an advocate. I'm going to try to help. I'm going to try to whether it's contributing to organizations or whether it's awareness, like whatever it is. Where do you find is the most needed? Where does that spotlight need to be? Where do we need the most effort in order to be careful? I really liked your recommendations, so like build on those recommendations a little bit. Where do we need to be paying the most attention?
I feel like definitely like technology, so like on social media and stuff. Like I didn't get like I didn't get Instagram until my summer going to my senior year of high school, which I know seems like crazy to some people because they've had it since like middle school. But I think that's like a good time to have it because that's when you like are mature enough to handle it because these things do happen, and it seems like it's more often starting to happen on social media, like common ones like Facebook and Instagram. Everyone in here probably has Instagram, and like I feel like the age group that like gets it is just getting lower and lower. And you just have like these really young girls who like are so like naive and they haven't been exposed to any of this, and you're like putting them onto this thing where like things can happen, and they just like don't know any of that. So I feel like definitely like highlighting social media, like I there was like one study, or like there's this one thing I found in one of the articles I was reading where like Facebook already has actually had a bunch of backlash on them, where people are saying like that apparently it happens like very often on Facebook, and that Facebook is like not doing anything about it, and people are like getting mad at them for not doing anything about it. And so like yeah, it does seem like these social media platforms like don't care. They're not putting in enough effort to put a stop to this. So I think they definitely need to be actually trying to put a stop to these things. And then the bystander effect was like a big thing I focused, where like a lot of people, they, even if they see it happen, it's like they don't want to they're not willing to risk putting their own lives in danger. I mean, if I like have watched multiple of these social experiments, and like the amount of people who just like walk by and just like let it happen, I'm like, how are you not like jumping in there and trying to like help this kid who's like defenseless, and they just like are too scared to put their own life in danger. It's like just trying to have like a more like, I guess, I mean, I don't know how we go about this, but just like teaching culture and like the world that like they need to care more about this. Like you need to be willing to, even if it's putting your own life in danger, to help these people out, because that's how we can put a stop to it. Because I think a big part of why it has been allowed to grow so much is because like just like it just seems like no one cares, and like no one's doing
It was really interesting, like the of like I think I saw bus stops in there or something like that. Or of like what you would traditionally think of where we're in danger, this is where we're being kidnapped or
it.
whatever.
Yeah.
Those percentages are going down as all the social media percentages. So there you go. There's your case. Classmates, are anything? Any questions or comments?
I don't know, like I don't know just like of that many like Christian dating apps. I didn't really go as far into dating apps specifically in my research, but I think like it's kind of like anything where in this world where it's like even though you put like the Christian label on it, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone on there is truly a Christian. Like they can still be um, like have those motives, and so I feel like you still need to be careful on those just because it says Christian doesn't really like mean. I mean, it probably makes it like a little bit different from a regular dating app, but I feel like you can still have those dangers.
I would like to think churches, Christian institutions would be safer at least. But I mean, y'all know like all this terrible shit, like the Duggars. I mean, real high profile Christian family, and brother was a creep apparently. More and more stuff comes out about all that, and so like you get all these church scandals where you think a place where there was ever a place where people should feel safe. It's kind of a you hate to put labels like a lot of people like to villainize Christian institutions altogether. Honestly, there are days where I wonder if they don't have a point. That's a good point. It's like, hey, just because it has the name Christian on it doesn't mean you don't have to be safe.
um, well, Mr. Satterfield, whenever he was like presenting like the project test and saying how we should choose our topic, he was like saying like choose something that you like go on and on about, and like something that you're really passionate about. And I was like trying to figure out my topic, and I was actually just like talking to one of my coworkers, and we ended up spending like the whole 4 hour shift like just talking about it and like things I already knew without doing research. And I was like, man, I could really go on and on about this topic because it just like makes me really mad how like these things are happening under the radar and like nothing is being done about it. And so I feel like it was like then like after talking to her about it, I was like, I should probably do my topic on this because obviously I can spend the most time talking about it. I feel like because one of the articles I read, it was talking like about like movies and things that people put out, like movies and TV shows, it's like it creates this stereotype, and people are watching like a movie that's about like there's that movie like Taken and like popular movies like that where it's like about it just being like a strange guy and like creep who does this. And if everyone's watching those movies, they're like it just like creates that stereotype in their head of like, oh, it's like some stranger like creep guy. So oh yeah. I mean, that kind of like goes back to the whole thing about it being someone that's like connected to them, because obviously, like a lot of times, especially in like Disney Channel, just like all those things where it's like you have all these young actors and actresses, and they usually get really close with their like director and like the producers and stuff, and so they could have like considered him like a close friend of them, and like usually they kind of like become this like whole family, and so that kind of like further proves the point of like it was someone that was connected to them, someone that they probably thought that they could trust, had like created like the Nickelodeon family with, and then he ended up being this creep that was like trying to use them in that way.
What is the gender ratio for like what percentage of women versus men like tend to get sex trafficked?
Um,
Like if you know.
yeah, there was like one of my, it was like definitely like a larger percentage. I have like on one of my articles, it said it, but I think it was like I said the thing how it's like 1 out of 6 women. I think for men it was like 1 out of like 20 or something, where it was just like obviously like a larger, and then it was like I can't like remember the exact statistics, but there's another article where I was reading where it was like it was almost like the same amount percentage of women who were like trafficked for the purpose of prostitution. It was like that for men, but it was like for forced work. So I feel like for men, it's just like more commonly they are trafficked for the crime thing or for forced labor.
What age do sex traffickers target? Like is it children or like teenagers
Yeah,
or like
for for sex trafficking specifically, like I feel like for rape the age range is like smaller, but it's usually for sex trafficking 18 to like 34 is the more like common one that has a higher percentage. It doesn't start to like decrease in the amount until like 65 and up. So like really old women is like only like 3%, and then even like 35 to 64 is like 28%. So it does start to decrease whenever it's like you get like a lot older, but there's definitely like a larger range. Like they'll go anywhere from like young children to like a 50 something year old woman. So
Again, I like your recommendations. Like bystander effect thing that you said was did you find anything about girl safer in groups? I think like intuitively I would think yeah, probably, right?
yeah.
Any evidence for it? Like and the only reason I'm pushing that is like how many is a good number? Like, how do we go about this practically where to be safe, here's what you're probably gonna want to do.
Well, I think I didn't like specifically research that, but I just think that like I mean, if it's like you and one other friend, you still might not be like completely safe. But I think that if it's like a big group of like maybe like I don't know, like 5 girls or something, they tend to like stay away because it's like to them, it's like that's more people, that's more witnesses, that's more people who can step in to help if like he starts trying to like abuse one of the women in that group, and if like all those women start like screaming and like hollering or like attacking the guy, once they see that their friend is being harmed, like that will cause a huge scene, and like they think about those things, and so they're like not gonna want, like they'd rather just go for like one girl who's like easy and she's like obviously like alone.
Last call. Anybody got anything?